Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen. I am the almighty Zentaco, and today we're going to be learning how to do some isometric movement. So what is isometric? Well, let's go ahead and pull up dictionary.com to find out. Let's go to www.dictionary.com.
Who can say where the road goes, where the day flows, only time.
Isometric. So what we're looking for here is definition number 5, designating a method of projection in which a three-dimensional object is represented by a drawing having the horizontal edges of the object drawn usually at a 30-degree angle and all verticals projected perpendicularly from a horizontal base, all lines being drawn to scale. So essentially what isometric means is top down at an angle. So it's like a 3/4 view. So think like Diablo, Baldur's Gate, Qbert, Landstalker, Super Mario RPG, Snake Rattle and Roll, that was a good one. So there were lots of games back in the day that used isometric. It's not used so much often anymore, except for maybe like in Diablo series, but it is something interesting to learn how to do, so let's figure it out, guys. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start an application here. Now, to do the tiles on isometric is a little interesting. They're going to need to be twice as long as they are tall. So let's go ahead and click on the grid setup and modify this so that we can snap to the grid for the proper size here. We're going to have the width be 64 and the height be 32. So I'm going to insert a backdrop. And I'm going to make sure that these backdrops are the same size here. 64 width by 32. And so to draw our grid properly, we need to give it like a 45-degree angle. So I'm going to make the background green, and then I'm going to try to give this some straight lines using the line tool. This is not going to be perfect, but just roll with it. Alright, so there is my haphazardly drawn isometric map. Alright, so we're going to insert an object now. This is going to be an active object, and this is going to be our player. So let's name it as such, player. I'm going to give this some art right quick. I'm just going to make this a circle. Now keep in mind that we are going to need to place this properly on these squares. So kind of just put it on the middle of one of your squares for its starting position. And that is going to be how it lines up with the grid. Now go ahead and click on this object. We need to give it some alterable values, 2 of them to be precise. First one we're going to call X move. Second one we're going to call Y move. And now we're going to get down to some coding. All right, throw in a new comment so we can organize our code. And this is going to be inputs. And then let's go ahead and make a second comment and edit it. And we're going to call this move. All right, so we're going to insert here after inputs a new line. And so this is going to be where we get the inputs for our movement. So we're going to use the arrow keys for this, but you can use whatever you want. And we're going to do repeat while key is pressed. We're going to do right. Now keep in mind that for right, that's going to have to move. We're going to go this way, which is going to be down and right. So the X will be to the right, and actually the Y will be positive as well, because as you know, positive on the Y axis is down. So we want to find out if it is being repeated, but we also want to find out if the alterable values of X move equals 0 and Y move equals 0. And we're going to do this because we want the player to stay on the grid, so we're going to have to set up a system in which we set a value based on what we've pressed, and then we're going to subtract from that value until we reach 0. So we will only be accepting inputs when X move and Y move are 0. So now we need to do something on the player. We need to actually give some values to X move and Y move. So we're going to do that now. We're going to say alterable value. We're going to set X move to 32. Actually, sorry. We're going to set X move to 64. And we are going to set Y move. I'm going to copy this and edit it because it's a little easier. I'm going to set Y move to 32. So that'll move us to the right and down. So now we need to actually move this guy, and we're going to do that this way. We're going to find out if the value of X move is different than 0, because when it's 0, that means that we're done moving. So if it's different than 0, that means we need to update his position. So we're going to go to the player object, find out if the alterable value of X move is different than 0. So this is where we're going to want to move it. We're going to do this in a way that uses less lines of code. A little more complicated in terms of math, but once you understand it, it's not so bad. We're going to use something called sign, and what sign does essentially returns the direction of a value, meaning that if it's positive, it gives you 1. If it's negative, it gives you -1. And we can use this to set up our directions dynamically, and it'll give us exactly what we're looking for. It's a very useful function. So to get sign, all you got to do is take a number and divide it by the absolute value of that number. So we're going to do that now. So while X move is different than 0, meaning that there is a value here that's been plugged in. In this case, it's going to be 64. Then we are going to update the position on the X-axis. So we're going to set the position, his X coordinate, and we're going to set that to his current X coordinate. And we're going to put a parentheses here. We're going to add the value of X move, and we're going to divide, and then type in ABS, put another parentheses, and plug in X move again. Because like I said, that is sign. Now we need to close it off with 2 close brackets. So what we have here is we're updating his position by his sign value. So if that's right, or if it's positive, it's going to move him to the right one. And if it's negative, it's going to move him -1, so he'll go left. So that is all we got to do there. But then we need to subtract the value of X move, because every time we move a pixel, we want to subtract 1 until we've moved the entirety of what we had set up, which was 64. And then he will be 0 again, and we can accept new inputs. So let's go ahead and we want to subtract from X move, and we want to do the same thing. We want to subtract the value of sign, which is going to be the value of X move divided by the absolute value of X move. Now we want to do the same thing for the Y move, so go ahead and do that now. We're going to go here and find out if the alterable value of Y move is different than 0, and if it is, that means we have to update his position. So we're going to set his position, Y coordinate, and that is going to be his Y coordinate, and we're going to add the value of sign for Y, which is going to be value, grab Y move, and divide by the absolute value of Y move. And then again, we want to update the value of Y move. We need to subtract from it, and the reason we want to subtract the sign from it is because sign, it could be negative, so we want to make sure that we're bringing this value down to 0. If we just subtracted 1 and the value was like, for Y move was like -32, well then we're just going to actually keep adding to that value, or rather subtracting, but we're going to increase the value in the negative, which would go on forever, and you'd never stop moving. So we have to make sure that we dynamically bring that to 0, depending on in a way that whether it is positive or negative, it does so, which is why we're using sign. So we're going to go to alterable value. We're going to subtract from Y move the value of the sign of Y move, which again is just going to be Y move divided by absolute value of Y move. And boom. Now this is not going to be quite right, but it'll work a little bit. I'm going to have to show you. As you see, it gets where we want to go, but it does it in a really weird way. And that's because the angle is wrong. And to get this angle properly, we need to actually move the X faster than we move the Y. So we're going to do that this way. And that's why I showed you. I wanted you to see what would happen if we didn't do this. So under the X move, we want to make sure that we move here by 2 times the absolute value, or rather 2 times sign. So to do that, we're just going to, over here, we're going to stick in 2 times. And then we need to make sure here we also subtract 2 times the sign again. We're going to put some brackets around these though. 2 and times. So that should do it. Let's find out. We made a mistake initially on our movements here. We need to have, when we go right here, we want to set X move to 32 and Y move to 16. So this is going to change based on the size of your grid here. But for our purposes, this is what we're going to use. Now we're going to need to go ahead, and the movement code is done. We just need to change the code for, or add more code for inputs. So we're going to copy line 2 and paste it with Control-C, Control-V. I'm going to edit this so that we're pressing left. Now for left, all we got to do is set X move to -32. And we need to set Y move to -16 because negative on the Y axis is up. All right, let's go ahead and add an up and a down. So let's edit this accordingly. For up, we're going to need to set X to the right. So that's going to be +32. And the Y move needs to be, again, -16. That should be correct. And for finally down, we're going to need to set X is going to need to be +32 and Y move is going to need to be 16 in the positive. I think I got this correct, but let's find out. That's right, that's left, that's up, that's, oops, we messed up down. Down needs to be actually, X move needs to be negative. I apologize on that. That's -32. All right, so it now works and we move along the grid and we will never get off this grid. But we have a lot more work to do if we want to add like jumping or you know, the ability to fall into pits and obstacles. But this is how you do so far the very basics of an isometric map movement engine. So if that's all you want, you can stop watching now. But if you want to find out more, then keep watching. Okay, so now we are going to set up some backdrops and collide with them. So to do that, we need to do a few things. Double click on the player, and we need to change the hotspot. So select a view hotspot and do the quick move and put it at the bottom. So this is going to change where our object is situated. So we need to make sure that we place it appropriately in our isometric level, like so. And let's go ahead and create some backdrops. So to do that, I'm going to copy what I have for my grid. I'm going to insert an active object. And this needs to be called, I don't know, I'm just going to call it, let's call it backdrop. So the size of this needs to be the same as the tile, so it's going to be 64 wide. And for height, I'm just going to make it really tall, like 128. So I'm going to make this way. I'm going to drop that there, drop another one, and bring it to the bottom. Now I'm going to use this as a guide for how to make this spire. So I'm going to make sure that I make parts of it invisible, like this here. I'm going to make this transparent because we don't want to cover that up. This is going to be the empty space at the top. I'm going to recolor this so it looks different than the current backdrops. And I'm just going to get rid of this stuff. So, you know, just do whatever you need to do. This is just my version of it. I'm going to color this brown and give it 2 different shades of brown to give it a sense of depth. And lastly, we want to make sure that the hotspot is also at the bottom. So click View Hotspot and bottom here, Quick Move. All right, so that is my backdrop. So I'm going to copy these and move them around. You might have to change the settings of your grid to get it to move appropriately. Okay, so we're going to need to intelligently allow these to layer. So we're going to insert a new object for that, and that is going to be called the layer object. So throw that in here. And let's go ahead and set up the layering. So to do that, we're going to make a new comment for a new section. I'm going to call this layers. And this is going to be an always event. So always, and all we're going to do is under the layer object, we're going to select sort and by Y decreasing. So as you see now, by default with Y decreasing, we have a pretty good perspective set up for this without any real effort at all. So, but as you can see, we can move through the backdrops, and we don't want that to happen. So we're going to have to set up a collidable. So let's do that now. Going to insert a new active object. It's going to be, again, it's going to be 64 by 32 because that's the size of my base. And I'm going to essentially just copy and paste my base. Let me grab a copy of it now. Just going to paste it on here, and I'm going to make this transparent because I only want the diamond here. Boom, like so. Also need to set the hotspot to the bottom. And I'm going to call this collider. So we need to essentially place one of these at the bottom of every single one of these objects that we're going to collide with. So go ahead and underneath the properties, unselect create at start because we don't need this initial one to be created. But we do need to set up an initialization. So let's do that now. I'm going to call this initialize, and this is going to be a start of frame event. So insert a new event, make it start of frame, and what we're going to do on start of frame, go over to the backdrop object and select that. We're going to go down to count for each object. So this is going to run a loop for every single one of these objects, and we're going to call this collider. Now we actually need to do something on collider, so insert a new line here. Again, go to the backdrop. Go to loops on each object. The name of that loop was collider. And what we're going to do on that is we're going to go over to the create new objects here. We're going to create an object, which is going to be the collider. And we're going to set it relative to our backdrop. Now let's find out. Actually, I do want this to be... no, it's fine. All right, let's find out if that is placed properly. And as you can see, that is in the appropriate spot. But we obviously do not want to see these. So let's go ahead and uncheck visible at start. Uncheck visible at start so we don't see that. Okay, now we need to set up a collider detection object. So insert an active object. And we're going to call this detector. And just make this like a small little circle. All right, so you're going to have to, the idea behind this is we're going to want to set it up so every time we press a direction to move, it's going to move this little collider here where we're going to go. So because this object is a little off the grid, we're going to have to play around with this a bit because it's not actually centered because we're trying to create an isometric view. So it's not going to be hard though. We're just going to have to play around the numbers. You'll have to figure out exactly what positioning you need for your particular game and the size of your grid. But for mine, we're going to do that now. What we do is on inputs, that's whenever we press the button and we set the X move and the Y move, this is when we want to set up the position of the detector. So this is for the right. So we're going to go ahead and set its position, its X coordinate to the X coordinate of our player object. And I think plus 32 should probably do it. And it's also going to be down. So we're going to set the Y coordinate to the Y coordinate of our player object, and that should be about plus 8 maybe. Okay, that's perfect. As you can see, it goes right where I'm going to go, and then I moved to it, which is exactly what we want. So let's go ahead and fill in the rest of these and get our numbers that we need for these to make this work on all of these different directions. Let's test it out. Okay, perfect. So it moves exactly where I'm going to go, and then it lets me move to it. So all we got to do now is check for collision. So what happens here? Let's look at this. We set up the X and Y move variables to give them a value. Then we move according to those variables. So in between here, we need to check to see if this collider is colliding with a backdrop, or rather a collider. And if it is, then we know we don't want to move. So we're just going to reset X move and Y move to 0. We can also play a sound effect to let you know that you've hit something. Let's go ahead and add a new comment here. We'll call it collide. So insert a new event, and let's find out if this object is overlapping another object, and that is the collider. So we're finding out if the detector is overlapping the collider, and when that happens, we just want to set X move and Y move to 0. Let's test it out. Okay, I can't collide with anything. So all I need to do now is set up a sound effect. So to do that, we're gonna have to add a little stipulation to this, because if we don't, the sound effect will play continuously as long as these are overlapping, and that's not what we want. We want it only to happen whenever you press the button and it's overlapping. So we're gonna find out if one of the values, either X move or Y move, is different than 0, meaning that we've pressed the button, it's different than 0. So it's trying to move, and it overlaps. We're also going to need to copy and paste this event, so we do it twice. So for the first one, we're going to play the sound effect, and for the second one, we're going to update the X move and Y move to 0. So go ahead and play sample, and grab your sample. I have one in another game. We're going to pick my hit sound effect. And that should work. Okay, as you see, that plays non-stop, so let's go ahead and limit this one here. That plays the sound effect, and we will go to every, and we'll say like every 10 milliseconds. So now this will only play every 10 milliseconds while we're holding that button down. Okay, so all we need to do now to make this complete is set that detector to be invisible. So uncheck visible at start, and we're done. That's all you need for a simple isometric game. We can add some jumping to this. We could also add the ability to get on top of blocks and stuff, but to be honest with you, I haven't figured that out yet. That's pretty complicated. So, but this will allow you to navigate an isometric map as long as you're not having to climb on top of anything. Alright guys, thank you for watching. I hope you found this video useful. As always, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them down below, and I will do my best to get back to you. And until next time, you guys have a fantastic day.